happy to introduce Roy Malcolm, who's Central Region VDC Leader with DPR Construction, and Rayya Karaa, who's Senior PM VDC with DPR Construction, and they'll be presenting on leveraging data-driven scheduling and maximizing schedule performance.
Cool, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. I hope everyone is excited for this next section, as excited as we are. So we're going to talk about leveraging data-driven scheduling and maximizing schedule performance. So the way we do that at DPR is through visual planning. And that's one of my passions, so I'm super excited to get to share that passion with everybody here today. So we're going to talk about a lot of cool things. We're going to look at the visual planning process at DPR. We're going to look at some issues in the industry and how visual planning can overcome some of those issues. And then Rayya is going to share a lot about a case study and how we put that process to practical use. So a little bit about myself. Roy Malcolm, Central VDC Lead. I sit in Dallas, have been with DPR for 10 years. And this is one of my favorite project quotes from a superintendent. And I think this really sums up nicely what we're going to talk about today. And I did edit that. There was a couple F-bombs in there from the superintendent. He's a great construction superintendent, so it was even better in person. I have a video if anybody wants to see it later, too. That is the unedited version of his speech.
We muted it.
Yeah.
All right, can I borrow the clicker? Hi, Rayya Karaa. I lead VDC in Austin, Houston, and San Antonio. I've been with DPR for 5 years. I moved down here from Boston to contribute to this changing, beautiful skyline. One of my favorite quotes is, if a picture is worth 1,000 words, then a 3D model is worth 1,000,000. So just imagine what a 4D model would do. I know it's been a long day, so maybe let's start with a small challenge. How many of you have seen Gantt charts in the past? Awesome. So, small challenge, we've done this with a bunch of schedulers in the room. So we're just going to ask you to, can you guys hear me, by the way?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. All right. So we're going to actually challenge you to look at this blurry screen and figure out where the flaw in this concrete schedule is. If you see it, please raise your hand. And if you don't, that's okay, too.
Yeah. We'll buy anybody dinner who can find the issue in this schedule. And I promise you, you won't. It's obvious. It's so obvious.
Alex?
That could be it, yeah. But that is not the biggest problem.
Anyone?
Separate entry for sub instead. Like a level 7 is a separate entry from the other one?
Maybe. It's not that complex, though.
It can be sorted that way. All right, I'm going to give you guys a tip. And we're going to look at an actual visual plan. So now when you see the error, please go ahead and raise your hand.
Does anybody see it?
No columns.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So that's why my favorite quote is the one that I like. I mean, I think we've all seen, or most of you may have already seen a 4D visual plan, and that's not what we're going to cover today. In fact, we're going to cover DPR's take on it. But just looking at that, you didn't need to be a scheduler or even an engineer to realize that there's a floating slab with no supports, right? So let's move on to just kind of how we're looking at how we're evolving 4D visual planning. So VDC at DPR. DPR is a company on a mission. We call it our Mission 2030. And our mission is to be one of the most admired companies by then. So to do so, we're having to implement VDC best practices in literally everything that we do. Today, we're going to focus on the planning component. But in fact, we're involved in modeling, coordination, estimating, planning, field operations, and even facility management. And that helps us deliver projects more efficiently, provide more predictable outcomes, and elevate the job satisfaction of our teams and of our craft as well. The current challenges with planning are that the technology has actually surpassed our current processes. When we think about our contract documents, we're still thinking about the 2D plans and the Gantt chart, and I believe that's a problem in our industry. We realize that we have the 3D models full of data sets, and sophisticated visualizations, but we're still kind of looking at the contract documents as these basic documents that are still. So let's look at the evolution of or these documents that we're looking at, our plans and our Gantt charts. So we started originally with 2D plans and Gantt charts. We then figured, you know what, we can create 3D models from these 2D plans. How cool is that? Then we thought, you know what, this is not even efficient. We should have the 2D drawings be the output of these 3D models. But throughout the whole process, these schedules and Gantt charts remained the same. Today, we are designing in 3D. 2D drawings are the output of that 3D model, and the Gantt charts are still being visualized using now a 3D model. So we're tying the schedule elements to the model elements. But that is simply mainly for the sake of being able to distribute the plan and replicate it and make sure everybody understands what we're doing, without handing them those Gantt charts that are complicated, where most of you, if not all of you, couldn't even notice that the slab had no supports. Where we are today is that we are trying to utilize the 3D model to then create the schedule. So the schedule becomes an output of the data that is in those sophisticated models. So just like in the past, our 2D drawings became an output of the 3D model, we want our schedule to also become an output of the model. We're using production rates, quantities, and all the information that's in there to make better informed decisions. At DPR, when we start talking about visual planning, we start with 4 core items that we need to focus on. So the first thing we're looking at is logistics planning. We need to understand how that site is laid out. We're also focusing a lot on the safety of the plan and planning all that safety, all these safety elements to make sure the job site is safe for everyone. We're also talking about sequence planning, production planning, and eventually tracking that production to make sure we're doing what we said we're going to do. Hang on to some of these ideas. Now Roy is going to talk to us about why this is important and why we're doing this, and then I'll give you guys a case study.
Cool. Thanks, Rayya. So I'm going to share 3 concepts that explain really the why behind visual planning, and I guess some of these industry problems that we have, and the ways that we see visual planning being able to solve those issues. So that first concept, call it the productivity gap. And these concepts were developed by Gray Childs and Charlie Dunn. Charlie was a former DPR employee on the planning and scheduling side. Gray still works with us as well, planning and scheduling. We call this the desert vision that Gray had when he was traveling across the New Mexico desert on a trip from Texas to California. And so they first came up with this productivity gap. And you guys, everybody has seen this and heard this theme throughout the conference today. Value of construction keeps going up. Projects are more complex. They need to be built faster. They're larger, more expensive, et cetera. But our productivity in the industry has stayed pretty stagnant. I mean, that's something we've all heard many, many times. And why is that? What Rayya was just mentioning about our reliance on these 2D documents and these Gantt charts. We have all this great technology, but we put ourselves in this box in the industry to be reliant on these contract deliverables that aren't doing us any favors when it comes to productivity. One of the bigger issues now that we're really facing, which we'll talk a lot about today, are these skilled workers. Those are decreasing. We can't find enough people to enter the industry. So we have all of these new folks that are going to come into the industry. We also have a lot of supply chain pressures and now tariffs that are going to impact us as well. So there's an opportunity to use technology and visual planning to bridge that productivity gap, bring us closer to where we need so that we can support that value of construction as it exists today. So that's our first concept. Our second concept is what we call the detail gap. So imagine you have a project and we have a whole year to plan for that job. That's pretty nice. That's a luxury in today's sense in a lot of ways. But let's use that for an example. We have a year ahead of time. So we have a schedule associated with that project. However, a year is a long time. There's a lot of things that can happen. We might have health issues, might have family, a birth of a child, birth of a grandchild. We have vacations coming up, trips, work trips, events happening in the world, extracurricular activities. We could be working on another project and not even thinking about this one. Sports, Commanders are doing great. That's all I think about. Next year is going to be awesome. We're winning the NFL this year. So all of that is distraction that takes us away from thinking about that project. And then what ends up happening always is we don't get that right detail until 2 weeks before the job starts, and that's when we really start to plan. We have the right people on the bus, we have the right details, the right drawings, the right models, and so we wasted that entire year, essentially. What if we had a time machine that could bring that detail that we have at that 2-week period and bring that back a year? And can we do that same planning, use that builder knowledge that we have in the industry to build the job, to actually build this model and do some digital rehearsals, figure out all these issues, figure out that there's a floating slab, months ahead of time, when it doesn't really matter. We can figure that out, we can knock it out, because we know the sooner we get to that, or closer we get to the job, the harder it's going to be to make those changes, the more expensive those changes are going to be. So let's figure out the floating slab way back here, where it cost us nothing to fix, versus 2 weeks before we pour. So our final concept, we call this the approximation error. And this error exists anytime you are looking at a P6 schedule or a Gantt chart. And what this concept explains is that if we look at this example here with our drilling piers, in a traditional sense, the scheduler who put that together, in his mind, his or her mind, they knew what that meant. But if I'm looking at the schedule, I have no idea how many piers, are they cast, are they concrete, where are they located, the number of them. Those are all questions that I don't know just by looking at that Gantt chart. And so what visual planning allows us to do is it takes away that approximation error, the assumptions that we all make. So if we're all sitting in a room planning together, we can look at this and immediately understand, okay, there's X number of piers, they are this type, data from the model, and we can start actually planning from there. I've been in a million planning meetings where, the first 15 minutes of the meeting are everyone just figuring out what the heck we're talking about and where we're talking about. And I've even sit through hours-long meetings, and we say, hey, we're good. And then somebody realizes, well, shoot, we're actually talking about this area. The whole time I thought we were talking about over here, so that's not going to work. So this eliminates all of that, and it helps us become closer in terms of what we're planning. And then I want to wrap up these concepts, these issues in the industry with some stats. We've probably all seen these too, but they're pretty shocking, pretty dire. And even these are a little bit older. But 1 in 4 workers in the industry is 55 years and older. That means they are getting ready to retire and leave the industry forever, and we will never get that knowledge from them back. On the other side, 4 in 10 workers are unskilled laborers, new to the industry, the entry-level folks that don't understand construction, don't know how to read 2D plans, don't know how to read a Gantt chart. These are folks that are coming in the industry, and then you can see the number of open jobs. This is from 2023, so that number has grown. And then a DPR study that we did in 23 that said we need 546,000 more open positions than normal. So on top of that normal 300 grand, that's insane. That's a real issue that we need to come to bridge the gap for, because we're going to have a ton of folks. What this data tells us is that we're going to need to find a ton of people. We need to attract people to the industry, and then we need to train them once they get here.
And train them fast.
Exactly. So that's where visual planning, we see that come into play. So I'm a visual learner, and it turns out a lot of other folks are as well. And when I think about one of the things that interests me or made me develop an interest in the construction industry were the visuals. Like, I like to drive past a project and say, hey, I was part of that, I built that. I have a house that I helped build in the summer when I was a high schooler down the street from my parents' house, that every time I drive by, I'm like, yeah, I built that. So that visual, that's why a lot of us probably got into it, right? I mean, did anybody here get in for construction for a Gantt chart? Probably not. So some other things that are on our side are 80% is the retention rate of what people see compared to only 20% of what they hear. That's why, given a presentation, we have slides and it's not just me talking. Also, 60,000 times faster is the rate that visuals are processed by our brain as opposed to text. And the visual messages that a human eye can register per hour is 36,000. So again, think about why you got into the industry and what are some things that we can do then to attract new folks to the industry using visuals. And there's some things that that's really going to unlock for us as part of visual planning. So now we have the ability to plan not only in space but in time, being able to really understand all of what's going to happen in the construction industry, removing that detailed gap that we talked about, and a significant reduction in surprises on site. We think about that example we started with, right? That floating slab, we've figured that out months in advance before we get into the field. And we're talking about the people side of it here in a little bit, because those are the issues we are trying to prevent, increase the well-being of the people on site. And then this more effective communication, more involvement from trade partners. This is really what we want to get out of this. This is where we can all come together and really collaborate. And folks that may not have had input into the plan before, now they have a very clear way to contribute to that effort, and they feel like they've been a part of the plan. I know we have trade partners that sometimes feel like they weren't involved with putting the plan together, and this is a way for them to contribute. And that's anybody. That's the new person that just stepped on site. They would be able to tell you that that slab was not right. So one of the key components of visual planning, again, where we're just talking about that communication, but here's what it looks like in action. So Rayya mentioned that we're not just tying 4D or tying model elements to a schedule. We are building that schedule from the model, and the way that we do that is through this collaboration. So in a typical setting such as this, we have our model tied to our work breakdown structure, our schedule activities, but we might not have durations or logic in there. So we bring in this team, a diverse group of folks. We might have the client, trade partners, everybody that's on this Zoom call, and they are collaborating and building the sequence of this schedule together. So that way, when we walk out of this meeting, we have an aligned plan that everybody agrees to, everybody understands through the visuals, and there's no assumptions, there's no approximation error. It's just a much more collaborative plan, and we can put together that plan much more rapidly than we could in traditional senses. And then finally, I do want to talk about the data side of this. It's in our title for today. So, and it's a key component to this whole process. It's not what we call Hollywood BIM, which is a lot of the 4D that you see out in the industry, which is just these pretty visuals that we might put together for a proposal and then throw away. Like these visuals that we create are actually data-driven. They're tied to a schedule. They follow that process of collaboration that I just talked about. But we're pulling these physical quantities from the model, and we're tying that to production rates. We're actually developing then the durations based on that data, and in using that logic with that production to go through. So Rayya is going to talk about how that looks in practice on one of her jobs.
And I want to just add that this visual planning work based on data is happening at the pursuit stage at DPR. We're not winning until we win the project to then start looking at the data. We're utilizing it from day one so that we're communicating a plan that works from the very beginning. And we're just fine-tuning it as we go if we win the job. Since I am local to Austin, I'm going to give you guys a local project as a case study. This is called Canyon Ranch, and it is a beautiful resort that we're building here in Spicewood, Texas. Over a 53-acre land. The project value is $180 million. We have 11 buildings and 161 rooms. It's not every day that we get to build a campus. It's not a simple task to understand the plan when it comes to such a large campus where activities were happening all over. This is why I picked this case study, because it gives you a good idea of how things would work if you had a lot of moving parts concurrently. So the buildings in the campus, we have 3 lodging buildings, buildings J, K, and L. Each has 3 stories. We have some public buildings, a beautiful spa and utility yard, a fitness center, a lounge, ranch house, medical and mind center, lots of tennis courts, admin and maintenance buildings for support. So as I mentioned earlier, we often want to start with putting together a logistics plan to understand the layout of the site. You can see all the 11 buildings. You can see how to enter and exit the site. How to enter and exit the site from here, parking lot, break area, etc. I'm not going to walk you through all of it. But this is our first step, because we want to implement that within our visual plan. I also want to point out that we spend a lot of time thinking also about the safety components on that site while doing logistics, making sure that our site is safe for everyone. So this is an example of our overall visual plan. If you're looking at the upper left corner, you'll see the overall site. And we have a zoomed in view of every building and where it should be at any given time. So if you're seeing your timeline at the bottom, using Synchro software, you're able to move your timeline manually and know where you're supposed to be on a specific date. Or you can simply play through this video and understand what the flow of the sequence, of the flow of the construction effort looks like. If you notice here, we're pulling videos. We're going to show you also Power BIs that we're utilizing today. We are on a mission to train everyone at DPR to be a virtual builder. We're doing training all the time. The expectation eventually is that everybody's in Synchro, but it's a learning curve and it's taking time. So for now, as we're training people to utilize that technology, we're having to rely heavily on some of these Power BI dashboards to make sure that the output is available to everyone, regardless of their level of training on the software at this time. But we are not planning to do this for too long, so it's a very big learning curve for everyone, and everybody's on board, and that's what's cool about DPR. So now I'm going to walk you through one of the outputs in Power BI as well of what our visual plan looks like. There are 3 tabs on the left-hand side. I'm going to go through the first and the third. The second is a simple viewer of the schedule in P6, so it's nothing too crazy to show you. So I'm going to go through the first and the last. So this first tab here is called the Look Ahead tab. And within that Look Ahead tab, our superintendent or anyone or the owner or project team is able to simply select this Look Ahead pull down and select, for example, 3 weeks. What would happen is that timeline at the top and the model viewer will sync to show you the activities that are required on your site within the next 3 weeks. If you hover over the text here, it'll tell you the full activity name and information. And if you actually hover over the timeline, it'll also give you the start and end date of that activity. I had to do screenshots for this because it would be really hard to drive a dashboard live during the presentation. But if you're curious to see it, I have it, and I'm more than happy to show it to you after this. The second tab I mentioned would just be the P6 viewer. And our third tab down here is our plan versus actual, my favorite. It's really complex, and I love it. It just tells us so much about this project. So what we have here is are different units, cubic yards, each linear feet, square feet. Depending on the unit, different scopes will show up in my model windows as well as in my timeline or in my schedule right here. What we're seeing down here is the planned work that we had set up in Synchro. For example, here we're looking at steel installation because I had selected each. And we are syncing the actual by using applications such as Synchro Field. So our teams are getting trained on their iPads to status elements that have been installed, and the information will feed back on our end. So we'll be able to see here our quantities, just like Roy described. We're using the quantities to then derive the durations. So we're seeing, for example, that level 3, so the steel on level 3 was fully installed, same for level 2, and same for level 1 within that building. The curve down here will show you the planned versus actual and gives you an overall idea of our project health. So visual planning is not necessarily limited to the model. We've done different things to also visually plan the job and understand our man hours required to perform a certain task. So if you're looking at the upper left corner over here, you'll see that I can select the building that I'm trying to focus on, or I can simply look at the project overall. So right now I have all the buildings selected. I'll wait for my syncing. So here we can select different buildings, lodging J, lodging K, etc. I can also, not switch the screen too fast. All right, I can also select the scope of work, so concrete, drywall, flooring, whatever it may be. The bars down here are going to describe the number of man hours required. So the longer the bar, the more crews we're going to need. And we have a little legend for the colors. So for example, light blue for ceilings, navy for concrete, orange for decking, etc. So just by looking at this dashboard, I can understand when a certain crew is going to peak. So starting in September of 2024, we're starting our concrete works. It peaks sometime in November and ends in February. Similarly, exteriors, we're seeing that exterior work starts sometime in maybe November, December timeframe, continues all the way to the end. All of these All of this information is derived from the quantities and the models, from the production rates, and from the durations that are shown in our schedules. All right, so we talked about how everyone at DPR needs to be a virtual builder, especially if we're trying to meet our mission 2030 of being most admired. And who we build at DPR is just as important as what we build. At the end of the day, all of this work that we're doing is done for these guys. We want them to go to work knowing what's expected of them, where they're supposed to be, and how they're supposed to be doing their work. But that's not enough. We actually need them to be part of developing that plan, regardless of language barriers, regardless of their knowledge of Gantt charts. We are now at a point where we're able to sit with our crafts and talk about the plan, show them the visual, and have them contribute and provide feedback, because together we'll be a lot more successful. I'm going to wrap up with a small story. This is me and Mr. Jose Rivera. So a couple of years ago, when ACC released their model viewer, we received an email saying, Jose Rivera, out of the Austin business unit, is the top user of ACC's model viewer on iPad. So they're like, Rayya, who's Jose Rivera? I said, oh, that's a project executive. That's awesome. I didn't realize he was using the model viewer. So we walked up to Jose saying, congrats, by the way, you're killing it. And he was confused. He's like, I've never used that. And I was like, I thought so, because I never showed you how to do that. It's brand new. So we were on the hunt looking for Jose Rivera. We're like, who the hell is this Jose Rivera? And for those of you who visited Waterline yesterday, this is Jose Rivera, a concrete foreman. We self-performed our models because we're self-performing concrete at Waller Creek, our Waterline project. And he was actually using the model viewer without thinking much of it, and he was building from it. So this was the moment that we found him on site, and I had to go spend some time with him and say, hey, what are you doing exactly? Can you show me what's working for you so that we can replicate that and make sure others are doing it as well? So this is our champion. All right, I'll turn it back over to you.
So I talked about this earlier, but the younger generations that are coming into the industry, or we need to come into the industry, Gen Z, the folks that are going to be a major force, major impact in the industry, they're very interested in STEM careers, but a lot of them aren't thinking about construction in the same way they are others. And that's a problem. So what can we do, again, to increase the use of visuals, to attract these folks to the industry? And again, think about the way that we manage some of those contract deliverables in different terms, maybe that we haven't in the past. So our industry needs to evolve in that sense if we are going to attract these folks. And then once we get here, to train them. We're going to have so many new folks that have no idea how to build anything. And we need to get them up to speed very quickly. So again, how do we train those folks? How do we help them understand construction? How do we get them excited about construction? And we believe that we can do that through visual planning. And part of that's going to be, like Rayya mentioned, creating these virtual builders. That is our main focus as VDC professionals at DPR, is to help create these virtual builders in all of our other work groups. And so we've started on the visual planning side with our planning and scheduling group. So this is DPR, our VDC teams, and our planning and scheduling teams integrating, and then our pre-con teams as well. We have the Virtual Builder Cup that our teams in the Central region compete for. Our virtual builders get together at our ranch in West Texas and have a conference and play games to win this cup. But we've essentially integrated those two teams together and made them so that they're not focused on some of these more traditional methods. Thomas is sitting here in the background. Thomas is a former super. Yeah, there's Thomas as well. Cameo. But Thomas was his former superintendent, now a planning and scheduling resource, and he's one of the biggest Synchro users in the company that we have. Previous P6 user, but through that integration, we've been able to introduce folks to new ways of doing things, better ways of doing things. And that's what it's all about, is that teamwork, us all being able to collaborate on this plan together, having the right folks in the room, being able to collaboratively understand what we're building so that we can build better, faster, so we can solve that productivity gap and that detail gap in the approximation error, eliminate those things so we can build bigger, better, faster, all of that. So thank you. Appreciate everyone's time.
We'll do a quick Q&A.
Yeah, we have time for
So I saw the 4D visual planning. So how user-friendly is it, and how much time does it take to actually schedule the entire thing? Does it take less time than the traditional methods that we use?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we actually did a study on this of the, and I wish I had that slide, of the time it takes to put together a traditional schedule versus what it takes with visual planning. And so the processes are very linear, because like one person essentially puts together that schedule. Then they have to have review meetings with others, and then they go back to the software and make the updates, and then they have another review meeting. And it's kind of this back and forth cycle. Whereas you saw with visual planning, when they're putting that together, somebody will do that initial setup, link the models to the schedule, and have your work breakdown structure, your schedule activities there. But then the logic of it is with that larger group of people, and we walk out of that hour-long meeting with that plan put together. So I think when we did an estimate of a typical pursuit schedule at DPR, on average it was about 20 hours for a traditional Gantt chart P6 schedule creation versus only 4 hours for a visual plan.
And in terms of how user-friendly it is, there are different applications that we're now focusing on based on the person's role until we can get everyone to learn Synchro Pro, because that's a pretty difficult software to teach everyone early on. We'll get there eventually, though. I really believe in that. So we're currently using OpenViewer for project teams and teaching them that. So it's similar to Synchro Pro, just a lot of it is grayed out, and there's no risk of them breaking anything or feeling overwhelmed by all the button clicks, but it gives them more flexibility across the timeline to really pull the data that they need to. We're also, as you saw today, capable of pulling a recorded video for those who are not comfortable with OpenViewer. Similarly, we have the Synchro Field app that we're encouraging our superintendents and project engineers to use to status items so that we can capture the actuals. But similarly as well, we have a dashboard in Power BI for those who are not yet at the point where they're comfortable using that technology. So it's definitely a learning curve for everyone. But at this point, you feel like people understood the concept. They want to contribute to the concept, but we're now at the point where just making sure that people are learning the actual software. Alex?
Yeah, I wasn't going to let you off the hook that easy. Come on, I'm going to give you something. So one thing I have a big interest in is trying to connect the dots between 4D and tact planning. I'm curious how you guys are trying to further and further connect that. And what I really mean is the nature of the on-site job trailer tact planning process, which is very much day-to-day. It's very, very fluid. And then trying to connect that back to the model for a connectivity, a correlation that can influence both the digital side and the chaos that happens day to day on the field side.
Yeah, that is also what we are trying to figure out too. But I think where we're at and some of our stance on it is the visuals can become the piece that helps everybody understand what those cars are, like in your tact plan. Even that, usually a spreadsheet or some kind of tact tool, that can also still be difficult for people to really understand what it is we're talking about. And so we've had some success of just using the visuals then. Having the 4D sequence will mirror what they've created in the tact plan and essentially validates that and then backs it up from a data standpoint. And then when changes happen too, we can rapidly visualize those. And I think that becomes a little bit more apparent then than what we see in the tact. But I think they complement each other well, and we're trying not to limit one to push the other.
Other questions? I'll have one, but I'm going to go on the mic here.
I think we have Lee.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So you mentioned the number of skilled workers are decreasing, and 25% of our experienced professionals are retiring. So have you thought about how to use visual planning to retain those tacit knowledge that we are losing?
It's a good question. I don't know if we thought through that entirely, no.
I was envisioning if we have like a ChatGPT like mentor for the Gen Zs coming into the industry and providing those knowledge, that would be awesome. So
I love that idea.
Yeah. And also, if like Rayya said, that right now the visual planning tool is not that easy to learn, and if we get the superintendents and scheduler to use more of the product, then their usage are data that can be captured with the tool, and that's one way to capture like what their thinking logic behind, and also like the evolvement of the schedule that can be reused in the future.
Absolutely.
Eventually, we're trying not to work in silo and have them be the ones to make all of these updates and changes. Where we're aiming to be is to be as good at visual planning and all these tools as we are in coordination. So right now you see project engineers running coordination, superintendents running coordination. I think that that's where the future is heading. And we'd like them to actually be in control of their own fate. So our role right now is to coach them through it, show them examples like the example I just pulled up, explain to them how the process goes, how the software goes, but eventually that's where the future lies.
So planning involves obviously understanding what you're building, but also the resources that go into it, knowing that we have historical databases of the resources we applied to deliver certain buildings and projects. What are your thoughts on applying that historical knowledge to your visual planning process, saying, well, if we had these resources, this is the outcome, but if we had had less these resources, this is the outcome? You know, how have you thought about using those historical resources necessary to deliver projects to help influence the visual planning conversation?
Yeah, that's part of our roadmap where we'd like to get to, I guess, develop our data. We're at the point where we're trying to create good data so that we can do something along those lines to be able to feed it and do more of that predictive analysis and even some AI-driven analysis as well, using what you're talking about. So we've had some conversations with some vendors and some different folks, Autodesk and Bentley, and we're trying to solve that problem. But yeah, I love that. That's where we want to get to.
Any other questions from the audience? I'll go then. So I work at a university up in Canada, and we're in the process of creating a new program on advanced methods of construction. And one, I guess, just a general question is, when you guys are looking to build this new team of the Gen Zs down here, is that up there? What competencies are you looking for? What skill sets are you hoping that they have, knowing that, you know, their role now, or the roles in the construction industry are constantly evolving and changing?
Yeah. I can share my thoughts, and Rayya, I'd love to get yours too. But I think they have to want to learn. I mean, they've got to love learning and want to be a part of that. I think that's the biggest issue that we talked about too, is they'll have to understand that. So if they're willing to come in and learn and want to be a part of that and are curious, like those are the skills we're looking for the most, because we know a lot of people aren't going to have these skills. This is something very new, and you know, we're looking for that in all of our folks. Even when we go out and hire experienced, you know, schedulers, are they curious? Are they interested in learning something like this and not doing what they've did forever? So.
I absolutely agree. I think curious, adaptable, and also creative in some ways, because we're always trying to crack something that's complex, and we're trying to figure out how to do it in a creative way, whether we're using technology or simply having aha moments and adjusting the plan all the time. So we always have to be adaptable, keep an open mind. But absolutely, I mean, our field is difficult because we're always learning. I once did an employee review, and he was like, why don't you say that I mastered all expectations? I said, if someone in our industry thinks that they mastered all expectations, they're a fool. I'm sorry, nobody mastered expectations. I didn't master expectations. The boss of my boss hasn't, you know, mastered everything. And this is the beauty in our field. If someone is curious, they'll enjoy it, because you're always learning something new. There's always a new update or a new software or a new technology that's out there. And if you don't keep up with the trend, you're going to fall behind.
Great. Yeah, and one other question, just because you're talking about training, internal training, and obviously DPR is a huge organization. What are you guys doing? I know, so you're both local to this area. What are you guys doing kind of across the country to share some of the case studies and knowledge? Like, is there internal training days across the country? Is there internal presentations that you're doing? And how do you, you guys are thinking about tomorrow all the time and trying to meet project demand. So how do you kind of balance that training internally?
I love this question because I just started the national training plan for DPR. We're actually having 4 core kind of markets that we're looking at, not markets, I would say 4 different fields. So we have building information modeling, design coordination, estimating, and visual planning as the 4 different fields to focus on. And we have classes of all levels from beginner to advanced. They are led across the nation online. Every quarter is focused on 2 out of the 4 topics, and they alternate. And everything is, you can join it remotely from wherever you may be. It's recorded, so you can revisit it. And we have a sister company that assists us in developing this training and also making sure it's standardized so that we're all learning exactly the same content, and it's not different VDC managers teaching different ways of doing the same task, because we know you can be creative. So that's where we are at now. We're developing a concept of everyone being a virtual builder. You can log in and see your virtual builder score and say, okay, this is where I'd like to be. We don't expect everyone to be a superhero at all 4. It wouldn't make sense for an estimator to be a rock star at modeling. We're not expecting him to do so. So your score is really weighed on one of the 4, or you being good at one of the 4. And the rest becomes extra points for you to stay motivated and keep up with industry trends and keep up with the changing landscape of the construction industry and technology.
Great, thank you. That's awesome. Any other questions before we wrap up? No? All right, another round of applause for Roy and Rayya.
Thank you.